Hello and welcome to my Dominating Blow Staff Guardian Guide for Path of Exile Siege of the Atlas. First, a quick disclaimer, Dominating Blow Guardian is not a new idea and has existed for as long as the Dominating Blow skill and the Guardian Ascendancy have been in the game, and it's been a strong league starter ever since. I have added my own touches to the build though, and I think I've created something very worthwhile. Dominating Blow is a combination melee and minion skill that offers a fun playstyle that's more active than most other minion builds, which just walk around and wait for their minions to do all the work. And it still gets the powerful boss killing potential of a minion build. Dominating Blow it's a regular melee attack that tags the target with a debuff that doesn't do anything, but if the target dies while affected by it, it will spawn a minion for you. This also destroys the monster's corpse, which gives you a solid defense against on-death effects like porcupines. This skill also spawns special minions when killing magic or rare monsters, and the rare ones retain their rare monster modifiers. Some of these modifiers are very powerful. They're being changed with the release of 3.18 and the Arch Nemesis modifier is going core, and I actually think that some of these are going to end up being a lot more powerful. Anyway, this modifier is kind of like a mini headhunter. It's not nearly as powerful as a headhunter, but sometimes you get some really cool effects to go with it. For bossing, this skill also has a chance to create a minion when striking a unique enemy, so you don't need monster fodder to create minions. Here's a quick summary of the pros and cons of this build. So the pros, it's very tanky with high block chance and recovery on block. At high level, you can safely AFK in the middle of most monster packs and you'll be fine. It has lots of damage for very little investment, decent map clear, easy to gear even on SSF. There are no required uniques, though there are two to three uniques that are ideal. Utility flasks are always up while mapping without Mage Blood. I'll explain that later. Dominating Blow, I find, is a more fun interactive playstyle than other minion builds where you just wait for minions to do everything. We're immune to curses, stuns, and the majority of ailments all the time. The cons of the build: you deal effectively 0 damage if you can't spawn minions, so certain counters are much harder. There are workarounds, which I will go over. You must be in melee range of an enemy to start spawning minions. I prefer this playstyle because I find it more fun, but I acknowledge that it's more dangerous. There's no way to effectively gear for spell suppression, but in most cases it doesn't matter. We can kind of tank most spells in the game, other than uber bosses. Maintaining Spectres can be annoying, but the changes to Desecrate in 3.17 made it much better. Gearing and maintaining Animate Guardian can also be annoying, and losing a Guardian gear set early in the league can be devastating, so follow the Animate Guardian tips that I give later. And for very juiced maps, your map clear is limited to how fast your minions can clear using Melee Splash. This is plenty for everything up to T16 maps, but it could fall off if you start getting into things like 100% Delirious maps or other very juiced content. And there are lots of alternate quality gems that are ideal, and they can be pretty expensive, but this is offset by the rest of the gear being inexpensive. You don't need these gems to get started, but they are sort of the most important thing that you want to look towards investing to early on. This build is a great all-around mapper and boss killer, though it does struggle with a few specific bosses, which I'll go over later. It's a fantastic delver, it's incredibly tanky, it has solid map clear, and it's high boss DPS, all with very little investment, and it scales very well with investment. The biggest problem point for this build is enemies with powerful damage over time ground effects that kill your minions, such as Uber Elder, Maven, and strangely enough, Veritania. She's not as bad as she used to be. They've kind of fixed her AI a little bit, I think. She doesn't seem too bad this last league. I'll go over some ways to deal with these bosses, but if you aren't in SSF, it might be better to just sell these encounters, or to get help with them, or to just wait until your character is very powerful. This was my league starter for 3.17 Arch Nemesis League. To give you a better idea of what the build progression might be like, I've recorded Path of Building snapshots at various points in the league to show you exactly how my progress went, and they'll be in the description below. I only played 3.17 for a few weeks before quitting the league because I played Elden Ring, but I still managed to make a considerably powerful character very quickly. So for our gems, our primary gem setup is using Dominating Blow linked with Multi-Strike. Don't worry about this being Awakened Multi-Strike. This is the very last thing I did in the league was buy this. Pretty much none of the footage in this video is using this Multi-Strike. I bought this and then I quit the league to play Elden Ring. And then after Multi-Strike, we have minion damage, impale. Either you can use increased critical damage, or faster attacks, or predator support. Predator support is technically the best here, but I don't like managing the mark the prey on it. Increased critical damage is the next best, and then faster attacks is sort of a little inferior to both, but it feels a little better because you're attacking faster. And then for your last gem, you are either going to use Melee Splash for map clear, or you're going to swap this to Brutality for bosses. You don't need to swap for map bosses, but for like end game bosses, you're going to want to use Brutality rather than Melee Splash. And then in our 6-link chest, we're making a very tanky Animate Guardian and Raise Spectre setup. So we have Raise Spectre, Animate Guardian, Minion Life, Meat Shield. These 2 gems make your Spectres and Guardian very tanky. And then to get some more damage, we have Feeding Frenzy and Maim. The Feeding Frenzy and Maim, it doesn't matter which minion they come from. They're going to increase the damage of your Dominating Blow minions regardless. So this is a good place to put them on the build. And then our cast when damage taken is linked with Molten Shell for defenses, Life Tap, and Carrion Golem. Having Carrion Golem here means we never have to manually resummon the Carrion Golem. It's just going to happen on its own when we take some damage. And Life Tap just means that the Carrion Golem isn't going to eat all of our mana when we summon it. We have tons of regen and life recovery here. We don't need to worry about the cost from Life Tap. For auras, we run Pride, Determination, Summon Skitterbots, Dread Banner, and an Enlighten. I usually don't have the Dread Banner in the same item as the Enlighten because Dread Banner is only a 10% reservation. It's usually fine to have it off on its own somewhere else. Use the Enlighten for the auras which take a bigger reservation. If you don't have enough mana reservation efficiency to use these, or you don't have an Enlighten yet, you can use Herald of Purity instead of one of these other auras. I think not instead of Summon Skitterbots, but instead of maybe Pride, you could use Herald of Purity, or instead of Determination, if you didn't want to be as tanky. And that will add quite a bit of damage. I think it is technically better to switch off of Herald of Purity and to these auras later on, but if you want to, you can carry Herald of Purity all the way into the endgame. I actually used it all the way until, I believe, the second weekend of 3.17 League. Our movement skill is very simple. It's Leap Slam linked with faster attacks. You don't need a 4-link item here. You can say I just have a 2-link. And then another 2-link for some other skills. If you can get a Phantasmal Leap Slam, it moves even faster. And remember that quality on your faster attacks also makes this faster. So once you get it going, you can move pretty fast with Leap Slam. Like this is my Leap Slam. It's pretty fast. The best curse to use for this build is Vulnerability. Ideally, you want to get this from a curse on hit ring like this one, but you can self-cast the curse until you have a ring like this. And then with any remaining gem slots, you should fill them with utility skills sort of in this order of importance. Convocation, Flesh Offering, and then either Desecrate, which I have in my inventory here, or a Rallying Cry, which I don't think I'm using right now. It might be. No, I don't think I'm using Rallying Cry. When you use Convocation, put Convocation on your left click. This is going to passively summon your minions to you all the time, just whenever it's off cooldown, so that your minions stay closer to you, they are more consistent at dealing damage, and they regenerate a little bit of life every time you do this, which is pretty helpful for your Spectres and Animate Guardian. As for Rallying Cry and Desecrate, Rallying Cry is a pretty minor DPS boost, but Desecrate will let you spawn corpses on demand, which you need to cast Flesh Offering, and Flesh Offering is a major DPS boost, which is pretty nice to having as bosses. So just whichever one you can fit into your build is helpful, but these are sort of lower importance compared to the other skill gems on the build. For our gear, the only uniques we use on this build, other than for Animate Guardian, are Ashes of the Stars, this amulet right here, Sporeguard, and an optional Intuitive Leap Jewel, which you would put right here if you were using it. I'm not using it right now. And then an optional Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh combination, which is this one, and we take Sanctuary. You can wear the Rotting Legion chest armor until you get Sporeguard. It's usually a 1 chaos item in Trade League. It offers some bonuses to zombies. It gives you a free meat shield link, so you can use your Raise Zombies instead of Animate Guardian while you're wearing it, since at this point of the league you probably don't actually have a gear set for your Animate Guardian yet anyway, so probably better to use the zombies at this point. So Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh might look a little scary, but these 2 jewels in total only cost me 60 chaos during 3.17. This modifier gives us Consecrated Ground while we're stationary, which is whenever we're attacking. and it makes the enemies take increased damage. That's a lot of extra damage, actually. That kind of modifier gives a ton of extra damage to your minions. And the Consecrated Ground also lets your minions regenerate. For the most part, not that important, but for Animate Guardian, it's a huge amount of regeneration. For a weapon, we want a staff with any mods that make our minions hit harder or faster, and then any attack speed mods to let us spawn minions faster. Defenses like block chance or resistances are nice too. I'll go into more detail on the staff later. Early on, keep an eye out for the Floor's Gift Divination card and keep it on your loot filter. It'll help you get a decent starter weapon. It's a Divination card for a 5-link staff. Just try to look for a weapon base with decent attack speed and block chance. As I mentioned before, try to get one ring with cursed enemies with vulnerability on hit. This is a ton of extra damage, and it means you don't have to waste time casting a curse. If you can, try to also get a ring with Mana Leech on it. You'll see I don't have Mana Leech on either of my rings. You can also get Mana Leech on gloves. I like Mana Leech a lot more than Mana on hit for this build. We don't hit that many times, and Mana Leech is much more useful for bosses. We actually deal enough damage that the Mana Leech is plenty of sustain for us. Make sure you get a decent movement speed roll on your boots. You'll need at least one item with an intelligence roll on it just to have enough intelligence to use your max level gems. We get some intelligence from our tree, but just not quite enough to use max level gems. And then other than that, the only stats we care about on the rest of our gear are life, resistances, minion damage, dexterity to use our gems. If you are ever over dexterity, if you ever find that you don't have enough dexterity, try down leveling your faster attacks gem. That is usually the biggest dexterity requirement in the build. It's not super important. It's just for your leap slam. Impale also has a dex requirement, but it's not nearly as high. So it's mainly faster attacks is where you will catch on dexterity. And other than that, some nice extra stats if you find them on gear are attack speed, armor, and energy shield. So next, let's talk about Sporeguard. You don't need to use Sporeguard, but I think it's overall the best option for the build. It does a lot of things. First, it lets us anoint it, and anointments are very powerful in minion builds. Next, it gives a lot of stats that we want. Life, armor, energy shield, and chaos resistance are all useful. Next is this contaminate and fungal ground combo, which takes a bit of explaining. So whenever you're standing still, there will be fungal ground around you. We stand still frequently on this build because it's required to attack. Enemies on fungal ground deal 10% less damage, which is just a nice defensive layer on its own. You can hold Alt and see that on here. They deal 10% less damage. And then enemies on fungal ground also explode when you kill them, which causes a chain reaction, which is great for spawning your initial set of minions. Normally, it would be difficult for us to take advantage of this because we don't deal a lot of damage, but we actually scaled the explosion a few different ways. The passive notable Spiritual Aid, right here, increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you, also affects this explosion. And then we're also getting, or I am also getting, Culling Strike from Kingmaker's Presence. This is an item on my Animate Guardian. Gives global Culling Strike to nearby allies, which includes you and your minions. Again, I'll go into more detail on Animate Guardian in a bit. This Culling Strike affects my attacks, so it makes it easier for me to proc that initial explosion. And then that Culling Strike also affects those explosions. So those explosions all have Culling Strike, which makes it very easy for these explosions to chain react and just clear a whole screen, create a bunch of minions for you, and just make life easier. This is the best source of map clear other than just the melee splash on the minions in the build. One more item to talk about is Ashes of the Stars. This is by far the best amulet for this build, and there's no competition, but it isn't required. This item was incredibly common and easy to farm even in SSF during 3.17, but it might be harder to obtain this league as they've rebalanced some boss drop rates. If you can obtain a phantasmal quality dominating blow, like I have right here, then the extra quality from Ashes of the Stars will actually make dominating blow summon more minions, which is the biggest possible DPS boost you can get. It gives lots of other bonuses too. The quality gives increased life on Divergent Animate Guardian and Anomalous Ray Spectre. Increased shock effect on Divergent Skitterbots, attack speed on Phantasmal Leap Slam, which I mentioned earlier, and enemy damage reduction on Anomalous Dread Banner. So most of these are like high investment, alternate quality gems, but even without them, Ashes of the Stars is still the best amulet for this build for the +1 to gem level and the mana reservation efficiency. Technically, with this equipped, you don't even need to run an Enlightened gem. For some other skills in the game, it's possible to get an amulet which gives +2 to gem levels, but no such amulet exists for Dominating Blow, so this is the clear winner. Your best options for anointments on this build are Enduring Bond or Death Attunement for damage, and you can see that we could take both of them because Sporeguard gives us an extra anointment. Or you can take Indomitable Army, which is over here somewhere. Let me just search it. Indomitable, right here. Indomitable Army. Or you can take Decay Ward, which is right here. These give you some defenses for your minions if you find that your minions are dying a lot, especially your Animate Guardian or Spectres. Really annoying to resummon those, especially Animate Guardian. So if you need more defenses on your minions, those are the ones to look at. If you need more damage, then Enduring Bond and Death Attunement are probably your best options. Also for Death Attunement, since it gives you one Spectre, this is typically just enough permanent minions for us to always meet the 5 nearby allies requirement for Onslaught from our Ascendancy, right here. Well, there are at least 5 nearby allies. You and nearby allies have Onslaught. So that's our 3 Spectres, our Animate Guardian, and our Carrion Golem. So with only 2 Spectres, you only have 4 nearby allies. Skitterbots do not count towards that. Another powerful anointment option here is Enigmatic Defenses, or defense. This gives your character some more block and spell block, but that's about it. Now, speaking of Animate Guardian, which is this gem right here, let's talk about him for a bit. I won't go into too much detail. I think you should look up Gazzy's Guide to Animate Guardian. It's the best with the most detailed explanations of everything. So definitely look up Gazzy, Ghazzy. Yeah, look up that guide to Animate Guardian. It has much more detail than this. Anyway, the short version is, make sure your Animate Guardian is at least level 19 or 20 before you even use it. Otherwise, your Animate Guardian is going to die, and you'll lose all the gear on it. So for just about any budget Animate Guardian, you will always use these 2 items, Victario's Flight and Southbound. And then for a low budget Animate Guardian, you'll use Dying Breath, Ambu's Charge, and Learcast. For a mid-budget Animate Guardian, you would use Kingmaker. This is kind of mid to high budget. Sometimes Kingmaker is expensive. Mask of the Stitch Demon, also an expensive item. And a rare chest armor with the Benchcraft, gain X% of life as maximum, or as extra maximum energy shield. And then plus any resistances that you can get on the chest are ideal, so Astral Plates are ideal for this. Make sure, if you're using Mask of the Stitch Demon, you also have that life as extra maximum energy shield craft. They work together, they synergize together, you need both of them. Again, look up Gazzy's Guide to Animate Guardian for more details on all of this. And then for a very high budget Animate Guardian, you're going to use Kingmaker again, Doppelganger's Guise, and then a rare helmet with the Elder Influence mod. Nearby enemies take 9% increased physical damage, plus whatever resistances you can fit on the helmet. There is an elevated version of that Elder mod for 12% increased physical damage, but it's incredibly expensive. Even I don't have it on this character, so don't worry about it. So here's the passive tree. We are mostly just grabbing life and minion damage nodes on the tree and then supplementing those with block, resistance, mana reservation, and some attack speed nodes, which also gives some dexterity. You'll notice this build is quickly starved for dexterity if you overlevel your green gems. The spiritual command node, which is right here in this minion wheel, gives us quite a bit of attack speed. It makes our minion attack speed nodes also affect us. Very nice quality of life for the build. The build feels quite a bit better as soon as you pick up this node. Once you pick up Inexorable in the bottom left here, this is a pretty decent chance to generate endurance charges. This will keep your endurance charges up during maps. Maybe not during bosses, but definitely during maps. And then once you have this, if you want, you can pick up this endurance charge here, and then this endurance charge up here as well. Before that, I don't recommend getting the endurance charges. We don't really have another good way to generate them, but this is a nice defensive layer once you have Inexorable. And once you have this, if you want, you can also get an Intuitive Leap Jewel here, and this will let you take Barbarism, Juggernaut, and this endurance charge. I think for 1 less skill point total. It might be 2. I think it's 1 less total. Still worth it. 1 less skill point is 1 less skill point. That's totally worth putting a jewel in here for. You will also notice when looking at the PoB, the linked path of building in the description below, that I've separated the tree into leveling trees, one for each act. They're rough estimates of how many skill points you will have in each act, so it tells you exactly what order to get everything in, when to get it. Very smooth leveling, and there are very few regret orbs needed. In fact, almost zero regret orbs are needed. So starting from Act 1, you'll just go out here from the Templar start. These nodes up here don't really matter to us. This wheel down here is a ton of minion damage and 1 point of dexterity. This is pretty useful early on, so going down here just to get the dex is pretty nice. You can also grab 20 dexterity here early on if you need to, if you feel that you don't need the life early on. Anyway, this is usually what I do for Act 1. And then in Act 2, we just move up. We get more minion stuff up here. And then Act 3, we move over here. We get more life. And then we get mana reservation. This is when we start getting more auras around Act 3. So getting the reservation efficiency here is very nice. It helps us run more auras while we're leveling. It helps us clear the campaign a lot faster. Act 4, we're still moving along the same path. We go down here, we get some life, and then we get Resolute Technique. This right here is when I recommend switching to Dominating Blow. I don't recommend using the skill until you have this, because monsters evading the attacks, you won't have much accuracy on a Templar without either a decent level precision gem or just accuracy on your gear. Enemies are going to dodge your attacks a lot, or evade rather, and you're not going to generate your minions as fast as you should be, so it's better to use a more reliable skill before this, like Absolution, which is a spell, doesn't need accuracy. Then in Act 5, we're kind of going back up and we're filling out some points up here. We're grabbing this Life Mastery here. We're getting a whole bunch of minion nodes in here. This node is really nice. It's called Spiritual Aid. It makes your minion damage also affect you. This is very useful for leveling. Not super useful in endgame, but there is something we're using it for, and I will go over that later. And then as we move on, Act 6, we just kind of go over here. We grab Enduring Bond. This is a strong node early on. Later on, we will anoint this, so we don't have to do all this traveling. But this is probably the next strongest node you can get at this point. Also at this point, I usually use one of my regret passives, my passive respecs that I get during the acts, just to take this point of strength out and go this way instead, because we're going to go down here later. In fact, I think we go down there next. Act 7, yep, now we go down here, we grab this wheel, which gives us life and some reduced mana costs. And then Act 8, this is around the time where I start looking for a staff to use. If I haven't already found a good staff to use, this is when I start looking, because this is when there's not much left on the tree to take other than the staff node. So this is when you can start getting block on your staff. You can get some self-damage if that matters to you. It shouldn't, but the block is nice. And then this recover life and energy shield on block and spell block is really good. I'll talk about it more later. And then it kind of keeps going from there. Just, you know, Act 9, more life here. That's about it. Act 9 is not very long, so I didn't really add much to the tree here. Act 10, same idea. I added Divine Shield. This is a very good defensive node. And then we go down here, get some more life here. Go down here, grab Call to Arms. This is for War Cries. You only need to get this if you are using Rallying Cry. You might not even want to use Rallying Cry. It's kind of a lot of pressure on your gem sockets. So if you don't want to use it, don't. And then once we start maps, so early endgame, this is when you're starting maps. You know, you get some more life here. You get some max resistances here from Soul of Steel. And other than that, the tree is mostly the same. There's some extra max resistances here from Anointed Flesh. This is also your ailment reduction. This tree, combined with your Ascendancy, will make you basically immune to curses, immune to chill. Immune to freeze just comes from the Pantheon. And then if you want to take this point as well, you'll be completely immune to shock. As long as you have as long as you're using Soul of Garukan. And here's sort of the completed tree for what a level 100 character would look like. It's not much different. We've also gone down here to grab some more max resistances and get Corrupted Blood immunity. Corrupted Blood immunity is mostly quality of life, but still useful. These max resists are very strong. And we've also grabbed some spell block here. Some resistances and spell block. We get lots of attack block pretty naturally from our other wheels, like our staff wheels, and just from the block on the staff. So grabbing this whole wheel of spell block is kind of the next best thing to do. For your ascendancies, you're just going to grab the bottom half of the Guardian wheel. The order that you want to grab these is Radiant Crusade first. This one is 20 all resist, which is amazing for free. Basically 10% more damage and onslaught for you and your allies, as long as you have at least 5 minions nearby, which is basically all the time. After that, it's kind of up to you what order you want to get the next ones in. I usually grab Unwavering Crusade next, just because it's a lot more damage, but I play on softcore. If you don't play on softcore, you might want to grab one of the defensive nodes first. You can either grab Time of Need, which is a lot of health regen and near curse immunity, and it actually becomes curse immunity when we take the Resistance Mastery I pointed out earlier. Or you can take Bastion of Hope, which is sometimes gives you a lot of block chance, but it's only active about 40% of the time, so that's not really reliable. The actual good stats on Bastion of Hope are the stun immunity if you've blocked recently, and an additional 10% chance to block attacks and spells if you've attacked or cast a spell recently, respectively. And as long as we're running Convocation, Flesh Offering, or something similar, then we've cast a spell recently all the time. I run Convocation on left click, so this is always up. The next thing I want to talk about is, well, why use a staff rather than a one-handed weapon and a shield? Well, first of all, using a two-handed weapon means we have access to 2 6-links. We have a 6-link body armor and a 6-link weapon. This lets us 6-link our main skill and have a 6-link setup for our Animate Guardian and Spectres. Next, the higher base damage of a two-handed weapon makes it easier to spawn our first batch of minions in a map. We do have to attack something and kill it to make a minion. Usually not an issue, but it helps a little bit. Next, it's easy to get a lot of block chance on a staff, even without glancing blows. We get lots of block. There's no reason to use any other class of two-handed weapons. They don't offer any defenses. Our own DPS doesn't really matter other than just spawning that initial minion. We just want enough damage to spawn some minions, and then after that we just want defenses, and staves offer that. Next is we get to socket our main skill into our weapon, and there's a very powerful Shaper weapon mod that gives 20% more attack damage to socketed skills, and that affects minion skills as long as the minions attack, and our minions do attack. So this effectively creates a 7-link weapon. Next is that the staff mastery nodes are kind of broken, and no one seems to have noticed yet. So I already kind of mentioned the Recover Life and Energy Shield on block. This is one of the most desirable mods in the entire game on a shield, and we're getting it for free. The Energy Shield on spell block isn't nearly as powerful or useful here. We don't have that much Energy Shield, and spells are less common, but it's still nice. It still gives us a nice little buffer of defenses. And when you combine that with Divine Shield, which is right here, we're actually getting quite a bit of Energy Shield back all the time. So we pretty much always have a nice little buffer of Energy Shield. Next is this staff mastery of 30% increased defenses while wielding a staff. This is global. This is 30% increased armor, evasion, Energy Shield, and ward if you use it, all for 1 point. For reference, the highest percent Energy Shield notable on the entire tree is Arcane Focus, which only gives 20%, and it doesn't give any evasion or armor. This is 30% Energy Shield, armor, and evasion for 1 point. Anyway, those are really good. The other staff masteries I don't think are great. If we look at them, they're not great. Some of them are okay. This one, 8% chance to block if you stunned an enemy recently. Pretty useless most of the time. Not bad while you're leveling because you might actually be stunning enemies. But those 2 staff masters that I mentioned are really strong. The others are nothing special, but these 2 are very, very strong. Anyway, going back to why we use staves, using a two-handed weapon means we only need to craft or buy 1 weapon instead of 2 weapons or a weapon and a shield, so we save some currency. Speaking of buying weapons, keep an eye out for item level 83 Shaper influenced Maelstrom staves. This is your best weapon base. If you know how to edit your loot filter, you can make them show up all shiny when they drop. Buying a base to craft on usually isn't too expensive. Try to get exactly item level 83, and when starting out, just craft with either Essences of Zeal for attack speed or Essences of Fear for minion damage. The main mods to look out for when you're rolling a staff are minion damage, minion attack speed, block chance, attack speed, +1 to level of socketed gems, mana leech, and the aforementioned Shaper mod. as well as any resistances you might be missing. Much later on, you can try harvest crafting to get a weapon with like most of these mods all at once, but you'll need to look up a harvest crafting guide separately. I am not the person to ask about harvest. You might have also noticed that I'm not running any cluster jewels anywhere. For the most part, I don't think they add too much to this build, and we kind of want to travel to the nodes that we're going to anyway. So the cluster jewel advantage of saving travel points isn't much of an advantage on this build. There is one case where I would add them, and that's when fighting certain bosses like Uber, Elder, or Maven, which make it very difficult to spawn and maintain your minions. I would grab this large jewel socket here, put a medium cluster jewel in it that has the Blessed Rebirth or Blessed Rebirth notable on it, and any other stats on the jewel don't matter. It just make sure it has that notable. Try to get as few passive slots on it as possible so that it costs fewer passives to allocate. And what that passive does is it makes your recently created minions invincible, so that you're guaranteed to spawn some minions and actually have them do some damage before they die. Other than that, I don't think cluster jewels add too much to this build. I could be wrong, but this is my opinion right now. You might have noticed in the configuration section of the PoB, I have some weird custom damage modifiers in there. Most of these are to calculate bonuses from Animate Guardian gear, and I've labeled them as such. But if you want, you can disable them for comparison just by putting a special character at the beginning of the line like this. And then this removes the crit multiplier, which is given to us by Kingmaker. You can do the same for any of the lines in here. And I've labeled all of them to show why they're here and what they're coming from. So all in all, this tree is very defensive. We're only really taking 3 offensive passive wheels, maybe 4 if you use a cluster jewel. This tree gives us a very solid life pool with a decent energy shield supplement, and the energy shield is always recovering through a combination of Divine Shield and Staff Mastery. So speaking of Divine Shield, our physical damage reduction is pretty much capped against smaller hits. We have lots of armor, we have endurance charges, as long as you have inexorable. It's a little unreliable against bosses, but most of the time we have endurance charges. We have at least 80% max elemental resistances once we have the tree filled out, and you can actually get 81 fire. You could get a little more if you get some mods on your gear, mainly from influenced items. We don't really have access to a shield, which is a good source of max resist, but you can still get max resists on other influenced items. As I mentioned before, we're curse immune as soon as we get our last ascendancy and put 1 point in resistance mastery. Right here. We're freeze immune through Brand King Pantheon. We become chill immune through a combination of Brand King Pantheon once it's empowered, and the Anointed Flesh Wheel. There's some chill reduction in here, and that makes us chill immune. Same idea for shock immune. We use Soul of Garukon, which is a big shock reduction, and then combine it here. We're actually 90% shock resistant here. If you just take this 1 point, you become completely shock immune. But that is up to you if you want to take this point rather than something else on the tree. I don't, because I find that being 90% shock resistant is more than enough. And then 1 more resistance point down here makes us immune to Corrupted Blood, which combining all of this opens up a lot of available Flask mods to take just about anything you want. You could take immune to Ignite if you want. You could take some attack speed on your Flasks if you want, or more armor, or more evasion. Whatever you think works for you. Most of the things that people normally deal with on their Flasks, we have already dealt with on our tree, so you can take something else on your Flask. For damage numbers for this build, just as a reference, for 3.17, my damage numbers, right when I hit endgame, so right when I cleared the first 10 acts, I was around 500,000-ish, right when I got my initial set of endgame gear. And this is boss damage, this is serious DPS, so about 500,000 right when hitting maps. By the end of the first weekend, I was at about 1.2 million. And then by the end of the second weekend, I was around 8 million. And you'll see these numbers and how they're calculated in the POBs linked below. So yeah, it's pretty easy to get a lot of damage on this build. Not like absurd damage, but plenty of damage to do whatever you need. Since we don't have much evasion, we can keep our utility flasks always active in maps by using a combination of the gain X charges when hit by an enemy flask prefix, and then crafting use when flask charges are full through the crafting bench on each flask. This costs 5 instilling orbs and 5 glass blowers. It is right here. shows 3 scour orbs right now because it's already got the mod on it. Yeah, 5 glass blowers and 5 instilling orbs, and you can guarantee this mod. And whenever your flasks hit full, they'll automatically get used, and whenever you take damage or whenever you get hit by enemies, they'll gain charges, so they'll be refilling all the time. This is actually a good time to hop into a map and kind of show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to use this Alp-and-Go map. Doesn't really have any scary mods on it. I'm not really going to do too much in the map. I just want to show you kind of how the build works, and then how the flasks work. So let's find a pack and just sort of sit in. Let's not do a blue pack. Let's sit right here. You'll see that my flasks are already activated. I'm not pressed. My hands are off the keyboard right now, and my flasks are going off constantly. I haven't even summoned any minions yet. This is just my Spectres doing all the work. So let's go summon some actual minions, and you can see, you know, I killed one pack. This is an awful layout, map layout, but you know, it is what it is. You see that we clear packs pretty quickly. You know, nothing really difficult to worry about. I'm getting some video lag, so maybe won't stay in here too long, but just giving you an idea of what the build looks like once you're up and running, once you get moving. I'm pretty much just tagging each pack once, just so that my Dominating Blow minions refresh often enough, because they will time out eventually. They only last about, I think, 20 to 30 seconds, something like that. And as I mentioned earlier, they're, you know, being teleported back to me frequently just by having convocation on my left click. You can see how quickly I killed that 6 essence monster, like 2 to 3 seconds. And this is a tier 15 map, or tier, is this 14? 81? Yeah, this is tier 14, right? Where's the, oh, this is Bone Crypt. The boss is in the middle. I do want to show the boss just so you can see what the damage is like. I'm running fast. It's over here. Oh, and this is Maven Witnessed. Where's the boss? He's right here. There. Oh, this is in standard. That's why I'm picking up the Maven's Beacon. So that was with the Awakened Multi-Strike gem. However, that was also with Melee Splash instead of Brutality. So if you had Brutality in there, if you took out Melee Splash, put Brutality in, and then took out Awakened Multi-Strike and put a regular Multi-Strike in, the damage is going to be pretty similar. So you saw that tier 14 boss got deleted pretty quickly. So lots of damage. That's pretty much all there is to the build. So let's talk about leveling and getting to the point where you can actually use the build. As I mentioned already, if you look at the bottom of the tree in PoB, I've separated the trees into acts so that you can keep track of which points you should take and when. And then if you look in the skills section of the PoB, I've also separated skills into acts here. It'll show you which skills you should be taking in which act. And for the early acts, these are sort of rough. These are the skills that I use. Sometimes you won't have all the gem sockets that you need to use these. In fact, for Act 1 especially, most of the time you won't have all of them. So I've listed them sort of in order of importance. And if you can't fit all of them, don't worry about it. Just, you know, kind of remove the ones that don't fit. I would actually move the Frostblink and Leap Slam up a bit. I think it's a little more important to have a movement skill. But you get the idea. I've sort of listed them in the order that you should be using them. Same with the support gems. Like this added lightning damage, probably a little more important than the Ancestral Call. And then you'll also see that the gem levels are only like level 3. Don't worry about that. This is kind of just an estimate of what gem level it might be by the end of the act. I don't actually know. Just sort of there to show that it's not going to be like a level 20 gem. You'll also see these skills are all disabled. That's just so that they don't interfere with the actual calculations for endgame. Right now you'll see this unreserved mana warning is because we don't have all our points on the tree. If you just go back to the main tree, it'll fix it. So when you go into the lower trees, you'll see that some warnings on here. Don't worry about them because it's trying to use endgame setup and endgame skill setup without the endgame skill tree. So early on, we use Smite, Raise Zombie, and Summon Holy Relic. Once you enter Cavern of Wrath, you can pick up Absolution. Once you go back to town after entering the Cavern of Wrath, you get Absolution as a quest reward. Equip that right away, start using it. It will make you much stronger. The leveling will be very smooth as soon as you equip Absolution. Absolution is a very strong skill for leveling. So in Act 2, we're killing all 3 bandits to get the free 2 passive points. The other bandits don't offer anything useful to us. Alira offers some resists, not as powerful as 2 passive points. Once you have Absolution, you're going to use it as your main skill until you switch to Dominating Blow later. Early on, the zombies are pretty much useless, like right at the beginning of Act 1. But once you pick up a Vitality Aura, they should stay alive pretty well, and then they're pretty useful after that. Picking up Herald of Purity in Act 2 is a huge power spike. And I've got it listed in the Act 2 gems here. And then there's another smaller power spike when you buy Dread Banner in Act 3. I recommend waiting to switch to Dominating Blow until after you kill Dominus and start Act 4, and only after you have Resolute Technique on the passive tree, the keystone that makes your attacks always hit. The Dominus fight is really annoying as a melee build, so that's why I recommend not switching off of Absolution that early. It's not so much Dominus himself as the minions before him, especially the Cyclone guy. The Cyclone guy, for some reason, is really deadly to minion builds, or to melee builds, and also shreds minions very fast. So it's a really annoying fight if you switch off of Absolution that early. Most of the other gems are not super important while leveling. Clarity is great quality of life to ditch your Mana Flask. Make sure you grab at least 1 movement skill. I use Frostblink. Later on, add Leap Slam when I can link it to faster attacks. If you're playing on hardcore, you should grab a Decoy Totem as early as possible, which is pretty early for Templar. I think it's right as soon as you enter town. It's useful in softcore too, but in softcore you can drop Decoy Totem to make room for Dread Banner in Act 3. That's a lot more important in softcore. Once you clear the Twilight Strand in Act 6 and you have access to all the gems at Lily, try to buy at least 1 of each of the gems you'll need for endgame. You might not have enough currency yet, but be ready to buy your gems then. You especially want to start leveling Animate Guardian and Raise Spectre as early as possible, even if you aren't using them yet. A very quick note on Spectres. The Spectres you want to use are Carnage Chieftain and Host Chieftain. These are both available from the Ashen Fields in Act 7, and they provide Frenzy and Power charges to your minions respectively. If you take the Death Attunement Anointment, which is this one up here, which gives you +1 max Spectres, then you can look for an Arena Master from a Warlord-influenced map. If Demon Harpy Spectres still exist, they're actually better than all 3 of those Spectres, but they were a Scourge exclusive monster, a Scourge League exclusive, and they only existed in 3.17, I believe due to a bug with one of the alternate quality Desecrate gems. So for now, let's look for a Carnage Chieftain and a Host Chieftain just so you can see what they look like. Here's a Carnage Chieftain right here. It's this ape that's giving Frenzy charges to the ones around it. I think there's a Host Chieftain there as well. If you have a skill on your toolbar that uses corpses, there's a button you can hold in your key bindings, and I've changed mine off of the default, so I don't know what the default is. To see the name of the corpse, make sure you're hovering over the right corpse you want. This is a Host Chieftain, so this is one that you would summon. Also look for a Carnage Chieftain. Carnage Chieftain is more important than Host Chieftain. It is more damage. Try to get these as soon as you can, like right when you reach Act 7. You'll only be able to get 1 Spectre at that point, so grab a Carnage Chieftain. It's a ton of extra damage, and it will help you clear the game a lot faster. I've also included sort of a miniature leveling guide and Q&A in the notes section here. It's pretty detailed. It doesn't have as much detail as the video probably, but this should be helpful, especially if you're a newer player. I hope it helps you out while you're leveling. Sort of in conclusion, I guess, in the description below, there will be 5 PoB links. The first link is to the main PoB guide for the build. That's the one that you're going to want to click on and take a look at, and look at all the notes, look at everything. It has all the details I've gone over in this video. Next 4 links are my actual build progression during 3.17, just so you can get an idea of where I actually was compared to where you might be. The first one is after the first weekend of the league, then after the first week, then after the second weekend, and then when I stopped playing to play Elden Ring, which was around 3 weeks into the league. There's a big jump in gear on the second weekend, as that's normally when I personally start making my big purchases in a league. Anyway, I'm very confident in this build as a league starter. I had a very smooth start to 3.17 Arch Nemesis League with it. I even played it during the 3.17 Gauntlet until I died to a totally avoidable Avarius Slam in Act 10. That being said, I won't be league starting this in 3.18 just because I've played it 2 leagues in a row, as well as a Gauntlet, and I have an experimental Flicker Strike build that I want to try. However, if I wanted to be confident on having a strong and fast start to this league, this is absolutely the build I would play. So on that note, I want to quickly mention build diversity. I've seen a lot of complaints recently about build diversity and balance. But the reality is there are probably hundreds of builds you could play as a League starter if you knew how to build it. In my opinion, the problem isn't game balance, it's just the limit of content creation. There aren't nearly enough content creators to highlight every build available in the game in limited time before a League start, and even fewer who are knowledgeable enough to create the builds themselves. Back in Scourge League, I started the league with a self-made Venom Gyre cast on crit Eye of Winter Deadeye. And this absolute Frankenstein of a build actually turned out pretty well. It struggled a bit with bosses once I hit like tier 14 and up maps, but still not terrible for a League starter. The point is that there are a ton of builds that either don't have build guides or that no one has even thought of yet. Like for what it's worth, Venom Gyre Strength Stacker wasn't widely known until halfway into Arch Nemesis League, and it's now considered one of the best Simulacrum farmers in the game, if not the best. So I just kind of want to show off this cast on crit Venom Gyre Eye of Winter monster that I created real quick, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. This was a very fun build that I liked a lot. It's kind of obnoxious on the screen, but I like it a lot. This was probably the most fun I ever had on a build. It just was not, you know, super great at clearing bosses. But you can see it clears screens exceptionally well. This is it's a tier 12 map, right? It's nothing super special, but lots of screen clear, fun build. It kind of does damage while you're moving because Venom Gyre casts whenever you cast Whirling Blades. Anyway, I don't want to go too much more into this build. This build is not what the video is about. You can also see I'm pretty tanky. I tanked that Volatile. This is on a Deadeye. I made a pretty tanky Deadeye here. I might make a video for this character in the future, but that's not what this video is about. I just wanted to sort of highlight that there's more build diversity in this game than you think. Anyway, so I'm rambling. It's time to cut this short. Thank you for watching my build guide, and I wish you the best of luck on your league start in 3.18 Sentinel League. Feel free to ask any questions below. I'll do my best to answer them. I might be slow to answer once the league starts. I'll be hard focused on leveling this weekend. Have a great day, and enjoy the league launch this weekend. Good luck.
It is not a battle you can win, hatchling.
The Tangle has empowered their champion. I shall do the same.
Riding mass. Perish. Riding mass. Inescapable doom. Zimzama! Otemba! Zimzama! Duh.
I must have time to gather